the cloud. Okay. And are we recording?
Yes, it shows recording.
Oh, we're recording. Okay. You want to go ahead?
So I'm Elisa Pavlis.
And I'm Tanya Schaefer.
All right.
And this is our final for Family 460 for the Amazing Grace movie. You want me to just start reading the questions?
Sure.
Okay. So the first question was, what doctrine in Wilbur's heart drove him to advocate? And why is the doctrine of the family so important to have in your heart to be passionate and persistent? I think I just put that he was a very compassionate man, and he had a lot of love in his heart, and that he just couldn't walk away from this mission. And like at one point he was deciding, should I like go live a solitary life and be in religion, and what should I do? But he couldn't walk away from politics, and I feel like he didn't realize at first that he could do both. Oh great, it's telling me my internet is unstable. Anyway, he said that, so I think he realized he could actually do both, and what he was doing was God's work. And I think he just had a firm belief in equality, and it kind of reminded me of, like, he just wouldn't give up. And so I think that it kind of reminded me of Joseph Smith, like all these trials and everything, but it was something that he had in his heart that was so passionate that he couldn't walk away from, and he knew it was true as well.
Yeah, I put the doctrine of equality as well, that all men are created equal and should not be treated with cruelty. And it was like all creatures, because it was the same like with animals too. Like he just felt really strongly about treating everything and everyone with respect and kindness, and that he had such empathy for slaves or people who were just suffering and what they were going through, that he couldn't turn his back on the cause. And it said after he had learned from personal accounts, he knew he could not deny what he knew. And same thing, like it totally reminds you of Joseph Smith. Like once you know what you know, you can't go
right
back.
right
I can't deny that. And
right. And it's funny because I was talking to my son about it. Oh, sorry, go ahead. It like cuts out, it pauses, so I'm like, think you're done, and then it's sorry, go ahead.
And I said it was important that we have the doctrine of the family in our hearts, to be passionate and persistent, because if we don't understand why we have families, then we're missing a critical element of the argument, and a solid foundation is needed first. Otherwise, all other information will not stand. Our beliefs guide our actions. Once we have a solid foundation, we can go about getting to work. I actually have a lot on this. I was like, we should be passionate and persistent, because change.
It's hard to just write a little bit.
I know, because change takes time. And so I think if you don't have that passion, like you'll get burnt out and you'll just give up. But if you're really passionate about it, it will carry you through those hard times when it feels like you're the only one fighting, or and we don't know who or what our efforts will touch or bring about. And so being passionate and persistent might be that impetus that gets other people taking action or stepping up. And we're being attacked on every front, and we're being desensitized to the wickedness. And so it's important to have a strong foundation and founded in the family. And it helps us align our desires with God's, which I think Wilbur was like that too, because I think just love, equality, all of that is in line with God. We're all his children. And then lastly, Sister Beck and her talk on the plan of salvation and how the plan was created for families. And so knowing, like, it's important that we have that doctrine in our heart, because it's the whole purpose of coming here. So that was a long-winded way of getting through my list.
No, it was good. It was good. Well, and I think, yeah, because I think too, like I think about if Joseph Smith didn't really believe what was going on, and he didn't have that passion to follow God and to do what was right, how easy would it be to walk away? And it was the same with Wilbur. Like, how easy would it to be like, this is not worth it. This is just something I was doing to be famous, or for whatever reason, like, I'm not putting up with this. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And I think it's that passion that's in your heart that keeps you engaged and keeps you going. Without it, I think you would just give up.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you'd be easily swayed into, you know, like you saw some of his, like his friend, as soon as he got, you know, his whole goal was, I want to be prime minister. And if this is helping me reach that goal, then I'm on board. But as soon as it can interfere with my plans, then you need to take a step back, you know, and trying to talk Wilbur out of it. And so you could see how, if you weren't passionate about it, how you could be swayed by power or money or greed or any other thing that comes up.
And being persistent. I mean, think how many times he went,
oh my gosh,
to Parliament and was like, okay, here we go again. I mean, he could have easily been like, oh, it didn't work the first time, so I'm done. But his persistence in the end paid off. So yeah.
I know. At the end when they were
so
clapping.
Question 2, I didn't like this one. Oh yeah.
I was just saying, at the end when they were clapping for him, I was even getting teared up because I was like, oh my gosh, like.
Well, yeah, and they didn't agree with him, but I think they like respected him even though they didn't agree with him. So yeah, that was cool. I'm afraid I'm going to cut you off just because like my computer freezes and then I hear everything you say, so I don't know, but I'll just, okay. So number 2 is, how did Wilbur employ the theoretical or Bronfenbrenner approach to become a more effective advocate? Identify at least one thing in each system and be specific. I had to go back and look because I'm always afraid I'm going to get them mixed up. But I guess we could start with micro.
Okay.
I just had like, he reached out to peers throughout his journey. He had a strong support system. He had his family, his peers. But I think that's like mesosystem too, right?
Well, I think like microsystem is the immediate, like if you're just talking about peers, like him and his peers, and just talking about him and his home. But when the interaction between peers and family, or between media and family, or peers and media, the mesosystem is the interaction between.
Okay. So I had like his peers and his family. And then when I got to the mesosystem, I included like, I get confused by those two, but I had like the parents, obviously his parents taught him about God and established a strong foundation of God. And I think that's what led him to be the person that he was, and the fight he was able to. I have his family that helped him out with his health issues, and that helped him to keep going on. But I also have like his wife, and I have that former slave. I think he had a huge impact in the whole thing. And that whole group, I put them as the mesosystem. I don't know if that's wrong, but like I had that whole group, and I can't remember all the names of all the people, but you know, all the people that sat down at that dinner table that were with him throughout that journey. And then of course, microsystem, I had like family and his close peers.
So I had, for the microsystem, I said, within his own home, Wilbur treated all creatures kindly and advocated against animal cruelty. So like he said at one point he had a pet rat, a hare, and a fox, and a crow that couldn't fly. And so just within his own home, he showed kindness. So, you know, it started his advocacy within his own home by being an example to, you know, I don't know if they'd be called servants, but people that, like his butler and cook. And then in the media part, I put his friend Equiano wrote his personal account in a book advocating through media. And so those were the two I used for microsystem. And the mesosystem, I put, he invited beggars into his home. So it was in the interaction between community and family. And then I put the community and media and peers all intersected in his efforts to educate them on the reality of slavery. And one example of this was when he had that boat tour where he stopped next to the slave ship.
Yeah.
And so that interacted him with his peers and the community. And so that was what I did for mesosystem. For exosystem.
Okay. Yeah, I always get confused by those.
I know. For exosystem, I put, for years, Wilbur advocated and fought for change within the House of Commons, trying to debate, convince, and encourage other members to change their vote. So I was taking it as the exosystem was the political ideology that he was trying to change.
I put in exosystem all the other people that helped him, like the prime minister, even though that was like his best friend. And then, yeah, I also put that in Parliament, he kind of started from the top down. It seemed like it, you know what I mean? Like he was already in a position.
Yeah.
Where he could start and go down. But yeah, like, I don't know. I get confused a little bit on all those. Yeah. I don't.
Yeah. And
no, I didn't like that question. I probably shouldn't say that on here, but
did you have something for macro system? I put Wilbur's advocating had reached so far and wide that even religious leaders were preaching about abolition. And so to me, that was macro because it was religious, or it was like a major. And then I also did chronosystem, which was just over time. You could see his efforts coming to fruition. I don't know if she wanted us to do chronosystem, but I added it just in case.
Yeah, I didn't do that. For macro, I just put that politician introduced bills, tried to change law regarding slavery, and then I put like the religious leader.
Gotcha. Yeah, that one was kind of hard.
I mostly, yeah, that was hard.
Because they're so there's so many crossovers and so close that it's like hard to
that's where I get messed up.
Yeah.
So do we want to move on to 3?
Yeah.
Get done with that one. Okay, yes. So how did Wilbur and his fellow advocates do and share their research? What evidence did they provide to persuade those opposing or on the fence? And then that's where I thought of like these are kind of out of order, I think. I should probably put them in order, but like that nice dinner that he had that you mentioned with the ship, I think being able to show people firsthand instead of being like, here's the stats. Because I'm not a number person. I mean, I am, but I'm not. But to see things firsthand and personal experiences. And so when they pulled up and he was like, remove the tissue from your face, and they could smell death. I think that was like a firsthand account where they could see, they could smell, they can use their senses. I think it brought it to home. I also like when he rolled out all the signatures in the middle of Parliament, and it showed the actual people that do support the cause. And I think that spoke a lot, because I think people, they're kind of in that room, they're in a elect bunch. I think there had to be from a certain like bloodline to be in Parliament at that time. And so they kind of, I look at it as kind of being a selfish group usually. So to be able to see like the outside and all the people that supported him, and then having the personal stories, like having the former slave that helped him and having that firsthand knowledge of what the reality of slavery was. And I think that they did their research and they found answers. Anything Parliament brought up, they had a response to. And they were educated. They weren't like, oh, wait a minute, I don't understand what you're saying, or caught off guard. They were just on it the whole time. And then I even think about like when it says fellow advocates, when he was not sure what he wanted to do, if he wanted to live in solitude or if he wanted to fight for slave rights, when they had that dinner at his house and the guy pulled out the chains and said, this is where it goes on their arms, this is like the neck and all that. I think that's one of the big convincing moments for him that swayed him to, he was on the fence, what should I do? And I think it pushed him over the fence to say, you know what, you're right. And then I also wrote, when he made that box to show the conditions in the ships where the slaves had to be. And I think the more I just wrote here, the more that he learned, the more responsibility he felt to proceed with his work.
Yeah. I had a lot of the same. I had, like because they all like spread out across the country trying to gather evidence and as well as get out the information. And so they, like the guy at the end who ended up coming back from the Caribbean or Jamaica or wherever he had been, Haiti, and he had those accounts, like he was going and getting names of, well, first was the preacher, like his monk friend, that he got names of like ships and ship records and ports and people. So they got that from John. And then Thomas wrote to men who had worked in the slave industry or who were witnesses to it. And so they had like slaves and the ship doctors who had treated the slaves themselves who had been whipped and branded, and then Equiano publishing his own account in the book that they sold over 50,000 copies in 2 months. And then, like you said, the tour, which to me, like, I think, like you said, the initial dinner that he went to was huge, but then when he got on the ship with Equiano and Equiano was telling him how when they're put the chains on, like it can either dislocate their shoulders or their hips, and they have to ride that whole 3-week journey in that condition. And then how they hang the women upside down and rape them. And I think that, like the boat tour with the elites, like when you hear firsthand at the same time while you're getting other sensory information, through either seeing like the chains hanging from the boat or the smell coming off the boat, or like he did when he got on the boat, like you just, like your eyes are open up to it. And it made me think of, I can't remember who wrote the book. I think it was called The Jungle or something, about the meat packing industry, and just how visually, like when your eyes are opened up, it's like, oh my gosh, like I had no idea how horrific this was. So I think they did a good job of getting that visual imagery out to people. And then I had the same thing, like with the petition of over 390,000 names. So I think we had pretty much the same thing that they did to collect evidence and share it.
And I think one thing that I just thought of just now is that whole ignorance is bliss thing. I always was like, well, really, is ignorance bliss? And I think of Joseph Smith, and I think of Wilbur, and I think of the more they got into it and the more they were like, they showed Wilbur was tormented. I mean, he had like nightmares and things like that because he felt such a sense of responsibility. So the more he knew, the more responsible he felt. And it was like, he was almost tormented. So now I'm like, oh, ignorance is bliss. Like I get that now, because it's like, you're stupid. You don't even think about it. But then do you want to be that way? So I think, it's like I always tell my kids, the more you know, and the more responsibility you have, the more you know, the more responsibility comes after that. So it just reminds me of that. So it, that.
Yeah.
And it reminds me, I don't know why I connected so much with Joseph Smith's story. I think it's just the cause, like pushing through with a cause when you know it's the right thing and the truth.
Yeah. I think that's like the whole point of this class, is because like once I read like the stories about the UN or what's going on at the UN or stuff like that, where you just get so fired up, like, how can this be happening? This is so unjust. Like, how is this going on? And so I think it's just bringing awareness, because a lot of people just don't know. And it's not that they don't care. We just go about our lives, living our life, trying to do the best we can. And then somebody comes along and points out something and you're like, oh, I had no idea. Like, I live in a bubble, apparently.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think this class is changing our perspective of that.
Yeah.
I was in training for work, and someone had mentioned a Trump comment. It wasn't necessarily negative. It was just about a law that had passed, or I don't know. And one of the girls was like, "Oh, Trump," and I'm like, "Okay, whatever." And so she goes, and then the like person speaking said, "Well, I'm not going to talk about that because there's Trump supporters, so whatever. Let's move on." So then later on, as they were leaving, the two women that were running the workshop said, "Oh yeah." To the other one, she got employee of the year last year. Did you guys see it in the newspaper? And the same girl that was like, Trump, she was like, oh, I don't watch the news. I don't pay attention. I don't listen to anything. And I was just like, wait a minute, you were just like bagging on Trump, yet you don't know you don't watch anything. And I'm like, that's easily getting swayed by the people that are around you and not educating yourself. You should not vote. But I was just like, okay, whatever. Okay, so I guess we can move on, right?
Yeah.
Number 4, how does the film portray the importance of working with and learning from others in a group? I guess we could just start with that first part. I'll just read the whole thing, and then we could just go through whatever
Okay.
we have. What has family advocacy collaboration taught you, and why do you think it's a good idea to discuss your thoughts with your peers each week in the HOA meetings?
I put the film portrays the importance of working with a group and the fact that Wilbur could not have achieved what he did without his colleagues. So, like with his help and just the amount of opposition he was up against, like he needed friends. One, because he didn't have all the information, so he needed friends who had been witness to or had knew people who could get the information they needed. And it was his friend in the end that started as their scribe that came up with their tactic to go about getting the American flag of convenience to be liable to seizure by privateers. So it was his friend that came up with that tactic in the end anyway. So it's important to have people, because you might, like, we all have different experiences and backgrounds, and so we might have a certain perspective and miss something. And so to have a collaboration, you're more likely to be able to reach a larger audience and see things you might not see on your own.
Yeah, I have the same kind of things. Like I put that he needed the support. I've expanded your perspective. Like, for example, the slave gave him like a personal account. He would never have had that perspective without having someone else. And then, the lawyer who found loopholes. That was an awesome, I love that part of the story. I was like, yes. And then how they got the most boring guy to present it. That was hilarious. Everybody was gone and they had free tickets to some event.
Yeah.
And then when I know, like, the more combine your effort, the more groundwork you can make. And I think there's a quote in one of the recent readings. It was Alan J. Hawkins, I think. And it was, and he talked about, like, you could either, like, instead of starting your own advocacy group, you would probably do better in joining others, because a lot of that groundwork's already done and you can just add to that. And so when you start your own, you're starting from scratch. And so I think in numbers, you do a lot better. And I think about our groups that we've been doing every week, even though I've missed a lot because of work, but I've learned a lot from you guys, because we all have different, even though we come from similar backgrounds as far as religion and a lot of views and things like that, I think that we've all had different experiences in life. And so I've been able to hear, and we all live in different areas with different types of people around us. And so I think we've been able to express our experiences. And and sometimes I think that you think you have in your mind what your ideas are, what's right, and then you hear another point of view and you think, you know what, I didn't even think of that. Like that's a great idea. And I think when you put all those ideas together, you could come up with one big good idea instead of these little, your own idea that might not take you as far. And people know people.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it kind of reminds me of Marsha Barlow when she was talking to the class at BYU, and she was saying how they need, when they test something to a target audience, how is it working? How is it being received to this target audience? And so I think, like with any advocacy, like you need lots of heads coming together, because like it's kind of like the brethren of the church. Even like some people are just more attracted to Elder Holland, and some are more to President Eyring, and some are, and so having lots of different personalities and whatever to think like, well, this is what I would relate to, or I think, I have friends on the left or the right, and they might, hear it better if it came across this way or whatever. It's kind of like that video that I sent out about marijuana. And at the very end of the clip, it talks about the environment and what marijuana is doing to the environment. And they went and filmed in California, up north, somewhere in, I don't know, anyway, Northern California. And the pictures that they had of these animals, like cougars and, squirrels and I don't know, just any wild animals. And then not to mention the amount of garbage and the deforestation that they were, because they're cutting down trees to have these grows or whatever, and the chemicals that were running in. And she said that several people that are more liberal of her friends, that was what got them. It wasn't, some of the other stuff that would appeal to people from the right, but it was the environment and what it's doing to the environment that the left was like, I had no idea. Like it was sick to my stomach to see this. And so it's like, you never know what is going to reach those people. And so you need lots of heads coming together to be like, hey, let's try this, and see
and
what sticks.
Find their angles that is going to touch like their beliefs. Because environment's a big one on the left. So
I know, that's what I was like, that's totally what Marsha Barlow was saying, that it's the environment. I was like, and they're trying to cut it down because they want to get it shorter, like 30 minutes, because an hour is a long time to get people to watch. And I was like, you have to leave the environment in there. I'm like, you have to leave something of the environment in there if you want to reach the left. So
and it's like those keywords that she talks about in the human rights, environment, those things. So like if you can pull out your view using their terminology, then so I thought this was a good question. Number 5, what parallels do you see between Wilbur and Captain Moroni and Alma 46? What is a Christian and professional family advocate, and how did Wilbur exemplify that? How can you be effective and Christ-like against such loud and degrading voices?
Okay, I had a lot on this one. So my first one was, I put Wilbur was like Moroni in that he was fighting for the freedoms and liberties of all men, meaning men, women, and children. So to me, that was like Moroni. I mean, when he went out and was like, for our wives and our children and our liberty. And so, I mean, that was an obvious one to me. And then I also put that he was like Moroni before he did his speeches, he would go somewhere secluded and talk to God or pray. Even though he wasn't, in the movie, it wasn't perceived as praying, he was talking to God, which is what prayer is. And And it was the same thing Moroni did. Like, he prayed to God for the cause of the Christians and the freedom of the land. And so they were both praying for their cause and for God to help them in their cause. And then he also stood up to when there were very few who were willing to do that. And it gave others courage to come out and take a stand, like not be on the fence or kind of be afraid to stand up. And so by his being courageous and willing, like Moroni, and he also brought up the issue and forced, like I said, people, there were two sides to the issue and they needed to choose a side. And so that was how I put he was like Moroni. And I'll let you talk about that, and then we can talk about a Christian.
Okay. Well, I mean, I basically put, like they both preached to the people, they both taught, they got support, and I put they were both a force against evil. And they both had passion in their hearts, and they believed deeply in what they're doing, and they used their belief system, their testimony, to guide what they were doing, and they relied on God. And then, so basically, the same.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead first with two, so it's not unfair that you're going first all the time. I just put, so for the second one about what is a Christian and professional family advocate, how would Wilbur exemplify that? I put that they had doctrine written in their, or that he had doctrine written in his heart. I think and so does a professional family advocate. I think when you know the truth and it's in your heart, like that's what a family advocate is. I mean, that's what it's that passion, it's that drive. You know what's right, you know the truth, which I've been talking to my kids a lot about truth. Like, you can lie all you want, you can have your own beliefs, but the truth will still always remain. And so I put, so that I think he had doctrine written in his heart as well. I think both a Christian and a professional family advocate live their life according to the commandments. And I think he did that. And I think, Christians do that. And I think when most people that are pushing for family advocacy, I think most of them, I mean, there might be people that are just based on the facts of how well children do in a home with a mom and a dad, but I think most of them have some type of deeper meaning in their lives that is connected religiously somehow, or somehow it's even just spiritually. I think that he also he represented the Savior, and I think that when we go out as a professional family advocate, even if we don't talk religion, I think we're still representing the Savior. We're still, and as Christians, we're definitely representing the Savior. And I also put that we live what he lived, what he represented, and we need to live what we represent. So if we're a Christian, if we're pushing for family rights and advocacy, we need to live and not just speak it. We need to live what we are teaching. And I think that's through being kind and loving and charitable. So that's what I have for that.
Yeah. I had similar, I said Christ is someone, or a Christian is someone who believes in Christ and his gospel and tries to live their life according to those beliefs. And I think, as a Christian or anybody who's religious, it's your beliefs or your faith that drives you to act. And it's the same with advocacy. Like, it's your belief system or faith in whatever your belief is that drives you to act and to fight for whatever you're advocating for. And I said that Wilbur exemplified both because he couldn't go against his conscience. And his friend asked him once if he intended to use his beautiful voice to praise the Lord or change the world. And like Christ, he did both. He was able to praise God and change the world. And so, yeah, I think you can have both when you're fighting for other people's rights and freedoms, in an unselfish way, like not for personal gratification, but and you're aligned with Christian beliefs that they work together. And I said, for me, I can be effective and Christ-like by having compassion and empathy while still holding my ground and engaging in respectful dialogue, because I think that's where a lot of times it lacks in the public forum, is the respectful dialogue, and just being able to walk away if it starts getting contentious or argumentative, to be like, hey, obviously this is going nowhere, and let's just agree to disagree and walk away. But I think also, like you said, separating, like we can have our religious beliefs and that can be what sustains us and drives us, but knowing the subject matter and doing the scholarly research to have something to back it up. Because even like Wilbur, he obviously had his faith and a belief in God and what was right and wrong, but you didn't hear them arguing from a religious standpoint. You heard the preacher in his sermon arguing, but from their standpoint, it was more coming from a human rights or that all men are created equal, and it was more about freedom than about this is the right thing to do under God type of deal. And so he was able to separate feelings from fact, or take out the religious argument.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing I've learned in this class more than anything, is that we can fight the fight without being spouting out religious things, yet we're still in tune with the spirit and we still have the spirit to guide us. But because I think of those two men that were with the different arguments, and the one guy was like spouting out all this religious stuff and God, it's the sin and blah blah blah, and I was kind of like taken back by it, and I understand what he was saying. But then the other guy, who had a total opposing view of what we're being taught and what we believe, had such a more profound impact on his audience because he had a personal experience. He talked about how well, he just had, it was just presented a lot better, and it wasn't anything being thrown down your throat. And I think that when people, not everybody's religious. I think if we were in a room full of religious people, we could speak religion. But if people don't believe in it in the first place, it's not going to do anything to change the way they feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if they're atheists or whatever. Oh, go ahead.
And usually people who don't like religion is because they don't like the, preached down to, like,
right,
you need to do this, you need to do that. That's why they don't like religion. So the more you are spouting, hellfire and damnation, they're like, the more they dig in their heels and are like, no.
I think people look at religion as conformity too, and they don't want to be, they want to be free and express themselves and whatnot. So I just think that when we, I put here, when we act, we need to act with love, listen and respect others, and not to stoop low like others do. Like, not get angry, not yell, not scream. Like you said, agree to disagree and be able to walk away when needed. And I like how, like you said at the end, you brought up when, was he a Duke, the guy that brought his slave in during the card game? Was he a Duke, I think? But at the end, and when he did clap, I think that even though he didn't agree and he didn't like what was going on, I think he respected it, Wilbur, because of how persistent he was and passionate, and how he never gave up. And I think that I like to think that people will respect us for sticking to our values. And you know, I told my kids that, and I think my oldest one has had experiences like this where you're at school and it's like, oh no, don't do that because Nate, Nate's Mormon, he doesn't do that. And I think they respect that, even though they don't agree with it, they respect who you are. And when you stand up and represent that, they're going to protect you. It's when you are wishy-washy or back and forth, or you can't decide, when they're going to start looking at you like, yeah, whatever, you don't really believe it. And so, and I think that, like I said before, live what you believe, even when no one's watching. I guess integrity. So I think if we have integrity and we listen to the Spirit.
Yeah, I think there's, like you said, there's something to be said about having conviction and recognizing that. But to me, it also, like when that Duke stood up at the end and clapped, like to me, it reminded me of America, how we, for the most part, we abide by the rule of law. Like when we have our elections and a new president is taking it, even though in theory, half of the country didn't vote for them and somebody else, they wanted another party in the office, they acquiesce and say, okay, he won, let's move on. Whereas in other countries, they might, start a coup or who knows to take over. And so it's like, okay, I recognize he won and he did it fair and square and he made change and we just have to accept it. And so that's a thought that came to my head too when he stood up, was like, it's kind of like when there's a new president, we might not agree, but we accept, okay, they won fair and square, they had more votes.
Yep.
Let's just move on.
Some people can't move on.
No, they can't.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we could be on to number 6. I always say Marcia because I knew someone named Marcia, but I think she says it's Marcia Barlow. Spoke on persuasive speaking and writing. Did Wilbur and others exemplify Marcia's ideas, and how so? I think they totally did. I liked how they had like visual aids, personal stories, demonstrations, like the chains at the dinner table, and the boat dinner thingy. They brought in the whole like my story, your story, our story, and so I think they were able to connect. Like this is a different stories, and this is how it affects you, and together this is how it impacts us and what we can do about it. And I put down one note: personal stories have more of an impact than numbers. So I think they totally were right on with her ideas of persuasive speaking and writing.
Yeah, I put that originally they came from a moralistic or religious point of view, but then they switched their approach and came from a more scientific or factual based point of view. And so that was more impactful when they came from a factual based, and also by using the narratives and personal accounts. But then I also put that they used word judo, especially Wilbur, like when the Duke of Clarence stood up and was like, revolution is like a pox and it spreads from person to person. And then Wilbur said, I bow to my honorable friend's superior knowledge and experience in all matters regarding the pox. So he was able to use his own words against him and make him look not as good as he, or as clever as he was hoping to be. And then also knowing which audience to appeal to, so like in the House of Commons appealing to a more factual and business type perspective. But then when they had those aristocrats come and have that dinner, knowing that there'd be women on board and speaking, having the women hear about the stories of how 400 men, women, and children died as they crossed the ship or crossed the Atlantic, and appealing to the women, because that these men have to go home and these women are going to be the ones who are like, how can you fight against this? Like these people, you know what I mean? Like women are just knowing the audience that they're talking to and speaking to them differently. I think they were really smart that way too.
Yeah, for sure. And I forgot about the whole know your audience, to take what people said and like kind of twist it, but not in like a mean or rude way. But I want to learn to do that. I think that would help so much. It's like, you're right. That point you made is right. Because when you think about it and then you kind of twist it and use their own words, then they're like, wait a minute. I'm not good at that yet. Maybe someday. I don't know. I think some of it's people are born with, but that I was not.
Yeah, I wasn't either. I'm the type that gets home and is like,
okay, so I guess we sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying I'm the type, when I get home after somebody said something, then I'm like, oh, I should have said this. Too late.
The whole, I should have said, oh, you know what would have been so good to say? Yeah, I do that.
Yeah.
Yep. And I've gotten better, but I still do that. Okay, so what role did the government policy and religious freedom play in the fight of the slave trade? Did you see their political system being pro-family? Why or why not?
So did you separate it and talk just about the government and then just about the policy and just about religious freedom?
I just kind of answered it all together. I wrote more about pro-family than anything because they were not. Yeah. I felt like, so I guess I'm going to maybe we could just go down to that part first, because that's the part I kind of really focused on. I didn't feel like, like I said, there's like a select group of people in Parliament, and I think it was just all about like what they wanted. I don't know if a lot of them necessarily looked outside of and really looked at people and really thought about the impacts that their actions and their decisions made. And they were for sure not pro-family. They tore people from their cultures, from their homes, from their families to live in horrible conditions for their benefit. And so I think they were complete opposite of pro-family. I think eventually, going back to what role did the government play, I just put that the government system worked eventually after a lot of hard work, it was working more towards freedom for the slaves. But I just put that they were selfish and that families were not represented.
Yeah, I put that they were focused on the individual, especially the aristocracy, how they wanted the rich to stay rich, and it was all about the shipbuilders or the ship barons and traders and all of that, you're taking away their livelihood and all of this. But obviously, the slaves were part of a family. They were somebody's brother or sister or mother or father, son or daughter, and they were being taken from their families. The women were being raped. They were torturing them. So obviously they weren't caring about what they were doing to these families and how they were separating them and torturing them. And so it was all just, to me, focused on money, power, and their individual gratification or pleasure, and what was best for them, especially the ones who were in the House of Commons, what was best for them. It wasn't thinking about what was best for the people or families. But
I was the very, very selfish, and I'm gonna whatever means we need to stay rich and to obtain our lifestyle.
Yeah.
So that was kind of messed up.
Yeah. For the government, I thought, the government, how it played into it was that they were so focused on imperialism, and it was even when they brought in that 390 signatures and rolled it out, the one guy he scoffed at it because he was like, you aren't representing the voice of the people. And he scoffed and he was like, the voice of the people, like, what do the people have to do with it? This, you know, this is what we say and what we want. And, you know, it was almost like, who cares what the people want? Like,
yeah.
And so to me, it was like I mean, obviously the government was responsible for creating the laws that, or the lack of them, that allowed this to go on. And so their laws or stalling or not voting was what kept this, you know, slavery continuing. So I thought that was how the government played. But the policy, like, I was mixed on the policy because I was like, is this public policy? Is this, you know, I don't know. So I just said the public policy was mixed because obviously there were people who were against slavery and people who were for slavery. And, but obviously the aristocracy was only concerned about how their lives would be impacted. And so it was, you know, a slave was a commodity and it was no different than money or any other piece of property. And that's how they looked at, and that was kind of like the policy or the general feel, but it slowly changed over time as I think more people became aware, and you could see that changing over time.
One thing I thought of was like the attitudes, like you said, the guy that scoffed at the signatures, and it's like, who cares about the people? I'm like, that's why America came to be. Was that kind of attitude, I think, was it's just like, you know, I mean, honestly, I think that's what we, I don't want to say, I mean, well, yeah, because I had family. But that's why we escaped from that type of environment, you know, religious freedom and the voice of the people, being able to, you know, have more of an equality. Yeah, that's what I thought of when you were talking. That's why we left.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just put, I think one thing I noticed too is that with religious freedom was like the religious guy, even though people were leaving and all that, he was voicing like equality and like against slavery. And even though people were leaving, he still had that ability and that right to voice that opinion. So I thought that was.
Yeah, I thought of kind of like how you said how we left the country, or, you know, how pilgrims decided to leave. And that it made me think of that because the clergyman was up there preaching a sermon on slavery, and many of the congregation got up to leave because they didn't like the mix of religion and politics, which was a huge reason why everyone left, because they didn't like the Church of England, you know, being involved, or, you know.
Right.
And so I think that played a huge role in the slavery, because you could appeal to other Christians about the inhumane treatment of slaves, but they still had their own freedom to, you know, they wanted the separation of religion and politics.
Yeah. Number 8 was actually my favorite question. It says, do you feel that Wilbur used his time on Earth well? How do you see him showing the elements of conservation that Elder Christofferson spoke of? And of course, in my notes, I have a big yes. I'm going off my notes because I didn't want to read everything I wrote because I wrote too much. But I think that Heavenly Father gave Wilbur specific gifts for this specific purpose in life. And I think he recognized that. And not at first, maybe, but I think he recognized that, and he continued fighting for righteous cause and causes, because he kept going. He didn't just, once they won this battle, he kept going. He lived his Christianity through his example, through his fights, and he didn't use his health as an excuse. You know, I think sometimes we're at church and it's like, yeah, I don't want to say the prayer. I don't really feel good today. Or, you know, I'm kind of, you know, I don't know, I'm just not feeling whatever. And he didn't use it. I mean, he knew that God had this purpose for him. And I mean, I think he had the health issues before, but it got worse because I think the stress and everything that he was under, but he just kept fighting. And I love that. And I think Elder Christofferson said, every day, every hour, every minute of your span of mortal years must at some time be accounted for. And I think that, and I'm like, holy cow, like our time needs to be accounted for. Like, am I idle? Am I just like, I mean, of course we have leisure activities and things, but there's a lot of wasteful time, I think, in my life. And he talks about, and it is in this life that you walk in faith to improve yourself and to be able to choose good over evil and right over wrong. And I think that Wilbur was accountable for every minute of his life. Like he didn't waste time. He didn't say, I can't do this today, I'm going to chill. I mean, even when he was sick and he went with his family, he was there and it was like, I got to go. And he like got up and left. I have to do this. And so I think he definitely used his time on earth well. And he was accountable. Like Elder Christofferson said, we have to be accountable for our time. And he was accountable for every minute of his life and kept going on even after the cause was won.
Yeah.
He kept fighting for, he was always fighting for a good cause.
Yeah. Yeah. I put the same thing, you know, like he definitely used his time. I mean, he spent over 20 years just on the slavery alone, but he also created the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, and he fed the hungry. He had a relationship with God. Like he tried to live according to his conscience and do what he felt like in his heart was what God wanted him to do. And he loved his wife and children. And so I think, like you said, like his time was spent in the service of God, basically, you know? Yeah. So yeah, I think he definitely used his time on earth well. And with regards to the other elements, like purity, I put that he, I mean, obviously, like he didn't want to take laudanum, however you say that, or no, that was respect for the body, but purity, like he was willing to submit to the will of God. Like he saw this was his calling from God. And so it was like, I can't turn away from it. Like he was even having nightmares about it because when it didn't pass, and he just felt that burden of these slaves are being traded because I didn't get this passed. And how many more slaves are being traded? How many more are dying because of this? And just the guilt and the burden he felt on him, like it was up to him. Like if he didn't do it, it wouldn't get done. And so I think he exemplified everything that Elder Christofferson talked about. I mean, the work, obviously he put in the work. His whole life was dedicated to it. And then respect for his body. Like even when he tried to be healthy, like he would race with his friend and keep his body healthy, and wanting to get off the medicine or the opiates that the doctors were putting him on. And just being the same, like with integrity, he was the same person in public as he was in private. Like he didn't, he lived what he was fighting for, like you said, you know, like live your belief. And especially when things get difficult, like you're the same person, which to me shows true integrity when you're that person, when no one else is watching or when things are difficult, like you still stand by what you're preaching, you know? So
yeah, because otherwise it's just an act.
Yep. Yeah, or it's to get, you know.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny what you just said on the next, oh yeah, of man. Like the next one, it says any other profession thoughts or personal insights from the movie. And it's funny because what you mentioned, because I have a quote from Wilbur, and it says, "I should have done more. I'm haunted by what I didn't do." And so that kind of goes like with what you were saying. And I think that we're not going to be haunted by the things that we did. We're not going to be haunted by the work that we put forth. We're not going to be haunted by the good things that we did in our life. It's going to be what we didn't do, like when we were idle or when we weren't, you know, doing those things that we should be doing. You know, my oldest son's kind of going through a hard time right now. And I was talking to my husband and I was like, there's things I should have done. Like there's more I could have done. And of course I shouldn't kill myself over it and like pound it in my head. But, you know, there's times where you feel inclined to do something and you don't. And then you can look back on it and say, you know what, I should have done that. And so I think like with what you said, and then that quote that he said in the movie, that just, yeah, but at least maybe we could always start from where we are as well.
Yeah.
So I guess we're kind of in the next question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I just put a couple like thoughts and quotes. Was that what, that was one of them. I like, if you make the world better in one way, it becomes better in every way. That was another quote I really liked. And I think that gives me hope, because I think about how overwhelming you think of the whole task. And it's just like, you don't need to conquer the world. You can just do it in small ways. Like the little things that we can do make a huge difference. Like Heavenly Father doesn't always pile everything on us at once. It's little by little. And I think that you can fight and be an advocate little by little to make big changes. And then his friend that had the slave ships and he repented and wrote his story and everything, reminded me that it's never too late to change, repair, or improve. And I think one of the most profound parts of the movie for me was he was blind, and he looked at Wilbur and he said, "I was blind, but now I see." And like that really got to me, because I'm thinking, here he is blind, and he was like, when I had my eyesight, that's when I was truly blind. But now I am here physically blind, and I'm free, and I can see. Like I know now. And I just thought that was like a profound part of the movie for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I did the same thing. Like several quotes just jumped out to me during the movie. Like when his friend, William Pitt, who became the prime minister, said, "The principles of Christianity lead to action as well as meditation." And I thought it's so true. Like we should ponder and think deeply about things, but once we've, you know, gone to God and prayed about it and whatever, we should it should lead us to action and motivate us to do things. And kind of like Joseph Smith, like once we know what we know, we're judged by that knowledge. And we have, like you said, you know, the more knowledge we have, the more responsibility we have, and the higher standard that we're going to be judged. And I used to think when I was younger, well, I just won't read or learn, and then I won't be held accountable for as much. And then it was like, but because I know that I'm purposely doing this, I'm going to be judged for that because I'm doing it on purpose to avoid.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, one, you know, you have to learn. We can't just, there is no fence sitting. Like we have to continually move forward. And then another quote that I liked was when Wilbur said to the members of the parliament that they should consider the good of their country over their own self-interest. And to me, this had a lot to do with child and family advocacy, because so many anti-family movements, such as the feminist movement or the sexual revolution, pro-choice, same-sex, no-fault divorce, cohabitation, all of those, they stem from a self-interest
for sure.
of society. And so I thought it was really powerful when he said that, because it's like, yeah, that's what everybody needs to do. That's the problem with, like, every problem we have is because it's people being selfish and interested in their own self and personal gratification. And yeah, so to me it was like, that's exactly what everybody needs to do. Not just government. But.
It's just selfishness. Selfishness. If everyone could put aside their selfishness, I think the world would be completely different. I know the world would be completely different. It's just we're so self-driven.
Yeah.
And we've been taught that, you know. So yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Number 10. What was your understanding of the doctrine of the family at the beginning of the semester, and how has it changed? I think as far as like what the meaning of the family is and like the proclamation and that kind of thing, I don't think that's really changed. But I think that for me, what has really changed is how I respond to people who call me a bigot or accuse me of like not of being, you know, hating a certain group of people or whatnot. I think I didn't know how to respond to others. I didn't, but I understand now what we're truly fighting for, because I think at the beginning I was like, well, you know, like I said, I live in the San Francisco area, and it's like, if two gay people want to get married, like, why does it matter? Like, it shouldn't matter who gets married if they love each other. But I'm understanding like the family and marriage, it's not about emotion. It's not just about emotion. Like family marriage is about the best situation for a child. And so I think for me, being able to gather that information, gather the facts, know that it's the children's rights that really need advocacy. Children don't have a voice. And so I think for me, that's been the biggest change for me in this. And I also know that I've learned that practice makes perfect. You know, I have a long way to go, but the more that the practice advocacy, the better we're going to get. And I also learned that of being able to advocate and see a side that's not just religious based. That was huge for me, because I always wondered, how am I going to stand up for people or stand up for things when people, my base of everything is religion. When people want religion, how do I get my point across? And I think understanding the doctrine of the family and blending that in with science is really helped me have a stronger foundation in advocacy.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like, I kind of like you, like I wouldn't know how to respond when people would say things like, why does it matter? What happens in my own home doesn't affect you. And kind of like how we were talking about, like the bioecological model of Bronfenbrenner or whatever, like how intertwined everything is, whether it's macro, micro, exo, meso systems, that how can it not, you know what I mean? Like, it's one, I mean, the most important are the kids, but two, like, this is society in general. And if these kids are being raised at a disadvantage, then at some point it's going to affect society, and we have to pick up the pieces as a society, you know, like, and so knowing how it affects, you know, how the family, because it is the foundation of society, that we're all affected when families are affected. And but I think for me, like, learning the difference between a comprehensive and a consent-based view of marriage was really cool for me to see. And for me, like, you know, of course I've read like the Proclamation of the Family, I don't know how many times, and hear all the time that the family is central to God's plan and all that. But I think, kind of like Elder Bednar had said, like, I understood the principles of the doctrine of the family, like obedience, temple marriage, law of chastity, all of that. So I understood the what we're supposed to do in relation to families, but I didn't really fully understand the doctrine or the why of the family. or at least not as well as I understand it now. So
Yeah.
that was important to know the why more than what I should be doing, but why I'm doing it.
I wish we could learn more like this in church, because I think that, and I know we go to church because we need to learn spiritual things. And I get that, but it's amazing to me that I didn't really think about pleading my case or advocating for family and bringing like so much science into it. And it sounds stupid that I didn't think of that. But I feel like I've been so taught, like, this is God's plan, this is religion, that I didn't think about using my religious background, using the Spirit, using my testimony as a foundation with all this other stuff that will have more of an impact on people. Because honestly, like I said, if people aren't religious, they don't care. Like, that doesn't mean anything to them. If people don't believe that there's a God or what they're doing is wrong, then it doesn't matter. And the fact is, the church isn't against, because I think they backed, what is it? Domestic partnership, I believe. I could be wrong, but I think the rights of, like medical care for kids, like that kind of thing, I think they back that. It's marriage. It's the institution of marriage that they really want to keep intact because of what, like, marriage is the reason the government got involved in marriage in the first place, was because of what it created and the protection of those children. So I think that was just like enlightening for me this semester. And it's kind of weird because you think but you don't.
Yeah.
Okay. And then 11 is picture your spouse and children, current or future, and write down some thoughts about how they will benefit from you taking this class. I think they've already benefited because we've had a lot of talks about things. We talked a lot about the things that they'll face and like the possibly names that they might be called, or because of their religion, they might face some persecution. And so I think I've been able to teach them the things that I've been taught in this class to help explain why they feel the way they do, and that they're not prejudiced, they're not bigoted, they're not a hateful person, that they actually love everybody and they are charitable and kind, but that the facts are that, the best circumstance for a child, and the facts are, like, you can't deny that. And so I think it's also given me confidence. And I think that's kind of flows, like, trickles down to my kids. Like, they're able to see that confidence and see that I'm not ashamed, and that I want to learn more so that I can stand up for what's right. And I think that is a good example for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think one, like, just opening up my eyes to be able to have conversations, like whether it's with other family members who might lean more left, being able to have intelligent conversations with them, but respectful dialogue, but as well as like just being more aware of what's going on both locally, nationally, internationally, and having conversations about current events or policies or whatever within the family to teach and model that behavior of, it's important to learn about these things and not just within your own like-minded, like, learn what the other side, what their opinions are, what their viewpoints are, what their arguments are, and have empathy and understanding for their opinions and viewpoints. But it doesn't mean that you have to forego your own morals or values or opinions, but that you are seeking understanding, but still holding strong to your own beliefs. And not to say that those beliefs won't change over time, like, for example, going through school, like certain things in science, like I was so against certain things, like the Big Bang Theory, let's say, but then it's like, why can't God use the Big Bang Theory? Like, I still believe God created everything, but why couldn't he use something like that to do it. Like, who knows? Like, and in
Right,
the
right.
scheme of thing, does it really matter how, as you know, just that it was done, and I still believe it was God, no matter how he did it. He did it.
Yep.
So your viewpoints can change while still holding true or firm to the ultimate truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then just, you know, the more you learn, the more you want to strengthen not only your family, but everybody else. Like, it drives you to action. Like, I want to protect other families, not just my own, but just families in general. You want to protect them. And so I think this class gives you that motivation. And like you said, the confidence, like, to stand up for your beliefs, or what you think is best for you, not just in the moment. Like, well, I want to get divorced when I want to get divorced, or I want to sleep with whoever I want to sleep with. You know, it's more like, I want this because this is what's best for community, and this is why. This is what's best for kids, and this is why. This, you know what I mean? Like, this isn't just about me and my desires and passions.
Right. I think it all goes back to selfishness again. It just seems like everything is tied to pride and selfishness.
Yep.
And I think that's stuff that we've been warned about forever. So yeah. Yep. And I think that's what we're talking about science. I think that's what's cool about our religion, is that we believe in both, where a lot of people think it's one or the other. And like, we can see a blend of both. And like, I believe Heavenly Father gave us those tools for a reason. Like, science is, of course there's some stuff that you're like, wait, what? But other stuff, you know, it makes sense. And I think the blending of the two makes sense. And, you know, like with any topic, I don't know about you, but when I went back to school, I felt like I could talk to people more because I had a lot more knowledge under my belt. And so I think that the more knowledge we have and the more we study, the more we're going to feel that confidence to be able to actually articulate what we're feeling and what we're thinking. So education doesn't stop with the diploma.
Yeah, so true.
So, well, I guess we're done. That was everything, right?
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, hopefully this all turned out and I can save it and I'll post it on to wherever I need to post it.
All right. Well, thank you.
Figure it all out. So, thank you.
Don't forget to do, we each have to do a peer evaluation, but then there's also some self-assessment. So
I'm going to turn everything in today and be
I know.
done.
I know. This is the last thing, and then I'm done with both of my classes, and I'm just like, yeah.
Yeah, so we relax a little bit. I start work like officially on Thursday, so I'm like, really?
Well, congratulations on your job.
Yeah, that happened too fast. So thank you. It happened way faster than I thought. I was hoping for a little bit of a break, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, good luck.
All right. Well, good luck.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.